Here today, we're going to be doing a pros and cons list for Robert F. Kennedy, and I feel like this is very necessary to go over Kamala, Donald Trump, and Robert F. Kennedy in a pros and cons list so we can weigh out the pros and see if they actually are better than the cons that are presented for these candidates. Of course, I don't think that this is something that a lot of people on the Democratic or Republican side are doing due to people just wanting to pick based on what team they're already on. It's more people are being a little bit too tribal with their decisions. So doing a list like this, I feel is very necessary. I hope I presented it in a good enough way that makes sense for the people and is receptive well by the people. I know some people are going to be mad, but let's get into doing that. So let's start off with one of the pros, something that I feel is very good to see due to what I just said before, how people are so tribal. It creates a divide in the middle where it's almost a situation that could play out into war. So when he is willing to call out both sides for the actual issues that they are creating and not just for issues that he has with a certain person, it is something that sheds light on what is actually supposed to be cared about. And of course, we can't allow someone to tell us what we have to care about. That's all up to us. It's definitely something that we have the privilege of having due to being from America. We have the opportunity of actually making decisions for ourselves and doing the research to figure out if those opinions are something we actually feel confident in having. So when he's willing to call out both sides for issues that he sees that they could improve on, I feel as if this is a necessary piece of the puzzle that helps everyone see everyone sees the play that is trying to be played on the people. So this is a big advantage, and this is something I really do believe is a huge pro for him. And although this is something that is very good, this is something that has a lot of benefits, it's also something that comes with a disadvantage. This is the first con. People look at him as someone who plays both sides, and it's very much not something that people are just saying just to say it. He is willing to take an attempt to try to work with Kamala's party. He's tried to work with Trump's party, and he very much is someone who shows support for Biden's party as well. Not 100% sure if he tried to work with them, but he's 100% tried to work with Trump and Kamala. This is something that isn't going to be great for him because people look at this as playing both sides, and it's not playing both sides in just an attempt to better the country. It seems to be an attempt to keep his name in the conversation, almost keep him from being forgotten, which is not something that everyone is going to be super happy with. Moving on to pro number 2, this is that he is very well read. He's someone who is very well read when it comes to proving all of his opinions. He's someone who bases his opinions mostly on stuff that he is able to actually cite different sources for the studies that made him have the opinions he has. That's something that is very much something he's able to do for a lot of the opinions he has, which is surprisingly not common when it comes to a lot of the other politicians. There's a lot of other politicians who seem to cast different opinions based upon what is going to help further them in the push of getting sponsors. In a way, it seems to be something that is an attempt to appeal to the donors. And of course, the donors are an essential piece of the puzzle of seeing if you can actually get the funding to make all the campaigns happen and all that fun stuff. But it's also something that is going to very much bring a lot of corruption. But when it comes to proving your arguments, this is also something that he is able to do very, very well because he was a lawyer. He is someone who has been able to figure out ways of creating narratives and creating certain things that back up, or creating certain based arguments where it's able to at least make you ask questions. So it's good, and it has its benefits. Moves us on to one of the cons, though, and that is some opinions that he has are not that consistent. Of course, one of them is Gaza. We're going to speak about that a little bit later, but one of the other ones is trusting moms.
These women were crazy, but they didn't look crazy to me, and they were rational. They weren't excitable, and they had done their research, and I was like, I should be listening to these people, even if they're wrong. Somebody needs to listen to them. I mean, I'd worked on the Hudson River with commercial fishermen, and I'd seen so many times when the scientists were wrong and the commercial fishermen were right about what was happening in the Hudson River.
I thought that this one was a very odd one that he said. Of course, I do think this is the human side of him where he wants to trust women. He wants to have faith that people are going to be pure and good. This is something that leaves him vulnerable in a few ways, but he forms opinions based upon things that seem to be more emotions or feelings that make him form this passion, which is something that, of course, could be really good. You can have some issues that aren't going to actually be fully delivered properly if the person isn't passionate about speaking on it or just going about it. Sometimes passion is a huge factor in if the message is going to be delivered properly. On the other hand, it is something that could make you form an opinion where it's just not going to be fully solid. His opinion on Israel, which I said we're going to speak on in a little bit, seems to be one of those, but also the trusting moms was just a very odd way of saying something that he I thought that was a strange thing. Let me know in the comments if you think that it is something that you agree with, though. If you think that you should just trust moms when they say there's an issue with their child, because of course I truly believe that there's possibilities for humans to be wrong when it is assumptions. So finding some facts within your study or within your quest of making your opinion is essential. I don't think just assuming there is something wrong with someone is a great thing, because there's a lot of situations where some parents assumed that their child was never going to be anything. They assumed something bad for them, which seemed to not play out in that way. So let's move on. Pro number 3. This one right here is something that I feel is very good. He's open to changing his opinions based upon being proven wrong. This is something that a lot of politicians seem to be very fearful of. A lot of politicians are very fearful of being proven wrong on a public platform or just in the public at all, due to their self-esteem being ruined. And a lot of them are just very delusional people who think that their number 2 doesn't stink, if you know what I'm saying. So it's very good to see someone like RFK being able to be open about being wrong and taking opportunities for people to prove him wrong. It's respectable, but leads us to one of the cons that I feel is very essential to say after saying something like that, is that sometimes he seems to use his lawyer skills to kind of wiggle out of admitting guilt. He seems to use his lawyer skills a lot in the debate with Dave Smith when it was about Palestine and Israel. He seemed to shout over him, seemed to use a lot of different tactics to kind of wiggle out of actually giving full proper answers, and it took them about an hour to finally come to the answer of the first question, which is not something I am super happy of seeing. When it comes to someone like a Trump, it seems to be very straightforward answers, or even if it's not a straightforward answer, he seems to not try to wiggle his way out and try to scheme around the questions. He seems to at least answer the questions enough to the point where people seem satisfied, which is something that I thought was just not a flattering thing to see within that debate with Dave Smith. If anyone wants to go check that out, I think it is something that is going to summarize a lot of my cons that I'm going to present today. But I truly believe that was also something that was very telling of how will it play out if you are in a very pressing situation against one of these leaders of China, one of these leaders of Russia that is going to probably press back a lot more than someone like a Dave Smith. And of course, Dave Smith, someone that is very bright when it comes to his political stances, but it wasn't seeming that he wanted to press the line too much when it came to seeing if he can get the answers out of RFK. He seemed to kind of be playing a little bit of the friendly game with him, which is reasonable, makes sense why. But one of the pros for RFK is that he's a motivational person in a very patriotic way for the youth. A lot of the youth nowadays are not going to be motivated by someone like a Trump because they don't really understand the whole aura. Some people will, some people won't. A lot of people aren't going to be sold on Kamala because I don't know how many reasons you want me to give for that, but the youth aren't very sold on the passion behind a lot of these candidates. Youth seem to be very motivated on passion. We're still in the younger ages where we are able to have this delusion of passion in a way. So the patriotic stance that someone like RFK has, that suburban dad where it actually seems like he could give you a good life, is something that rubs off and seems to motivate people to be the best versions of themselves, or at least the best version that they can be to help the country, which is something that sounds very sweet and simple, but it's something I think the people will understand when I say this. One thing that is a con, though, is he's very hard to actually listen to. So you have to have patience to listen to him. So when it comes to the youth, not a lot of youth have crazy, unlimited amounts of patience. A lot of them aren't going to sit through a whole podcast of his or whole speech of his due to the crackle in his voice is going to send them on a whole weird thing of being distracted. It's not surprising, it's just honest. A lot of people are not going to have the patience to bear with the voice, which is sad, but it's realistic. So it's something that I don't think is a strength of his. I don't think a strength of his is speaking. I think a lot of people have better ability for that and have a very better chance of captivating people's attention that might be a little bit younger, a little bit too old, or any of those people that are just not going to have that major level of concentration. I feel like that is definitely something necessary. Moves us on to takes on issues that are very important to the people. A lot of people are very concerned when it comes to vaccines. People are very concerned when it comes to a lot of issues. Ukraine and Russia, that's something that Robert F. Kennedy has shown that he is very much open to speaking on a lot of the things that people are just not open to speaking on. And that's scary for a lot of people. A lot of people are not looking to have the wool pulled over their eyes. It seems to me that a lot of people are very much trying to know the facts, and as we get further into this social media wave of having stuff at the touch of our fingertips, we do not want the opportunity of having another person know a little bit more than us. So when he takes on these issues of the vaccine, when he takes on these issues of some of these deep state characters and stuff along those lines, it is something that is very much appealing to an average Joe like myself who is struggling to create any momentum in any of the things that I'm trying to do. It is very motivating for someone like me to see an R.F. Kennedy being able to speak on things that are very much outcasted. And when I also look at it in the bigger picture, the reason why I started doing videos in the first place was to talk about the crazy things that was going on in the cannabis field. There was a lot of people using a lot of weird additives and a lot of crazy things to get the job done and to make it seem like they were doing a better work than they really were. So it was something that I truly could connect with RFK on when I see him speaking out against all of these big chads who are trying to take over in such a way that is going to be harmful for the end consumer. It is going to be very much harmful for anyone that is smoking any of that stuff, that is being given a lot of those different additives. And I'm very much off track now, but if anyone knows my videos from before, you can see why someone like me would be very much attracted to someone like a Robert F. Kennedy's whole policy stance and how he is about actually speaking out against things that are very much counteractive to helping the people. With that said, though, him having an open mind is also something that kind of leaves him vulnerable to the powers that be, leaves him vulnerable to being tricked, leaves him open to being used as a source or as a tool in corruption. What do I mean by this? It definitely could lead him to becoming a shill for Israel.
One nation that would not do that. One nation that would absorb 2,000 rockets a year from an enemy.
Yes, okay, again, sir. But again, so tell me what nation or what group of people would stand being occupied since 1967?
They're not occupied, David.
Okay, is the West Bank occupied?
Yeah, the West Bank. And you know why the West Bank is occupied?
It's also justified, right?
No. The West Bank is not occupied to protect Israel. The West Bank is occupied to protect the Palestinian Authority, because if the Israelis left the West Bank, Mahmoud Abbas would be overthrown overnight, and who would be in charge of the West Bank? Hamas. Is that
sure.
to you an acceptable outcome?
No, but I don't think the status quo is an acceptable outcome either.
Okay, but then that's why, I think we both agree now. Neither of them are acceptable outcomes. So how do we get to an acceptable outcome? That's what I think you and I can agree on.
It's sure not this war that you're supporting, sir.
Well,
it could lead him to becoming someone who is tricked into thinking that this one thing is safe because it actually grew out the ground, and lead him to start doing heroin or start doing all of these different things that he originally grew up thinking were probably going to be only bad because people shed a bad light on it, which leads me to say he was a former heroin addict. Kind of ruins one of the cons that I was going to say at the end, but adding this in now seems very useful because it's a great example for what I mean about how he could be tricked. When I grew up and was able to see the marijuana was talked about in such a bad light and was used as this tool to belittle all of these different things that grow at the ground and seem to be written off for all sorts of different reasons. One of the major reasons is the overuse, but marijuana is written off in such a shameful way that it makes it seem like all of these other things that grow out of the ground as well could be misled. So it's something that I truly do think left him vulnerable to trying a lot of these different things. He, from my understanding, I don't know if he ever smoked cannabis, but he seemed to be very open minded in his journey through drug addiction. He tried heroin, he tried a lot of these different things that are very much out of the box for most people. A lot of people are not going to try these things ever in their lives, but he seems to be a very curious person that went upon trying some of these things. If I had to summarize why someone like that would try it, it's because he's open minded. So that also leaves you vulnerable for bad situations, and I feel like that is perfect to say as one of the cons. Comes from a very well respected family. Comes from a family that is not just respected, but has been in both sides of the political parties. He has people that are on both sides, and that is something that very much gives him awareness of all of the issues, strengths, all the disadvantages. Of course, a con is that his family speaks out against him and actually rides with Biden. They favor Biden, and he says it's because they've just known Biden for so long. They're very friendly with Biden, all this and that. I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that at all. They also just don't seem to fully agree with some of the stances he takes on the Ukraine situation, on a few different situations. It's not something that I really think is a huge con. I wanted to mention it after mentioning that his family is well respected, just because it makes sense. So he also helped clean up the Hudson River. That is something that anyone who hears this is going to be like, what do you mean when you say that? Supposedly they were dumping all sorts of chemicals and all sorts of things into the Hudson River, which was making it uninhabitable. It was making it just insanely dirty, where people would get sick if they had any interaction with the water, and all these crazy things were happening with the water. The water actually got set on fire due to just being literally flooded with all sorts of crazy chemicals. I don't know what was actually the thing that ignited it, but it was on fire. It's amazing. Water shouldn't be able to catch fire. This water caught fire. I think that summarizes what I'm saying. It was dirty. He was part of the cleanup, and he was a huge piece of the puzzle of why it even was pushed for it to get cleaned up. This is something that is a huge feather in his cap when it comes to showing what kind of human he is. He's clearly someone who has passion for the world. He has passion for seeing longevity in this planet. He is someone who seems to be a good-hearted person. And this is something that a lot of people are going to get behind him because of. He's clearly someone who takes upon himself to put his time into things that are actually going to further the world, and no one can ever look at that as a bad thing. You don't see that with any of the other people, any of the other candidates. It's just not seen. People don't care about the world. They just want to drill, or they want to manipulate people into doing certain things for them, and just a very sad scene. So him helping clean up was huge. He is extremely biased on the Israel situation. So let's just get into this one. I wanted to save this one towards the end because a lot of people might be aggravated with me on this one, but he's extremely biased, and I feel like his opinion on the Israel situation is very radical, in the sense that he even goes as far as saying that he thinks the people of Palestine are the most privileged people. He thinks that they're privileged, that they are well taken care of. He's been quoted to say that Israel doesn't occupy any of Gaza, and then a few seconds later, maybe a minute later, goes on to admit that he was wrong about that a good portion of it is occupied, but this other portion isn't. So it's leads him to say it's not occupied at all. It's just like the wildest stance that I've ever heard anyone take on this certain issue. Of course, it's such a hard issue to have any stance on, and if you watch the Dave Smith debate with him, you can see they both don't really have a full answer, but it is clear as day that if one side is occupying the other, if one side is controlling the other's movements, controlling their access to water, controlling the power, controlling all of these certain things, keeping them in an open-air prison, it's pretty clear that there might be some sort of retaliation that the one that is being imprisoned might want to take. So whether or not you're on the side of completely disarming these certain people, it just doesn't appear to be something to have this stance on when he has such a very it seems to be something you can agree with him on a lot when you hear him talk about Ukraine and Russia. He seems to be very open to understanding why this all took place. He's very understanding of NATO's involvement in the whole creation of this problem. He seems to be very much understanding of the whole reason why it wouldn't be smart to continue this and to try to find a way to resolve this. But when it comes to the Israel-Gaza situation, all reasoning seems to be thrown out the window, which leads a lot of people to be upset and curious on why he has such a great view on a war that he doesn't have any involvement in, but then has this very biased view with this war he doesn't have any involvement in. It leads people to think, does he have an involvement with Israel? Does Israel have access to the understanding of what actually happened on that Epstein plane? Is that the case? Because he definitely was on Epstein's plane. He's quoted talking about it. So it's like, what is the reasoning? Why are you so biased towards this place? And of course, no one wants to see everything just crash and burn. And no one with morals, let's say it like that. But having this style of inconsistency leads a lot of people to speculate. So I think that this is a huge con. It's a huge reasoning why I truly don't believe he is fit to take on a position of power and take on a position of authority when it comes to making decisions based upon if we should go to war or if we're going to be funding certain wars. Because if he's so willing to have this stance on completely killing off innocent people and completely doing things that are very much against the things that we look at to be ethical when it comes to war, it doesn't appear like he should be the one to make the decision if we continue or discontinue these situations. So that leads us on to he did actually take care of special needs people when he was young. I feel like this is something that is honorable just as much as the Hudson River situation. Everyone likes these people who are able to use their time to not just help themselves but help others around them. And this is something that I truly look at to be an influence why I like him as a person. I think he's a great person. I don't think he is the certain person that's going to be great for president or the position of being a president, because that just didn't make sense when I was like, he doesn't belong as president or whatever I just said. But I think he's a great guy. Of course, as I mentioned before, former drug addict. He has a very open mind, very interesting person who clearly is very much going to try to take aim at the issues, not the person. He's going to take aim at the issues. He's going to talk about things that we actually need to hear about. Whether or not the people are going to be open ears to those certain things is kind of up to the people, and it's something that I find very admirable when you hear him speak. He seems to be very humble, very much open to being wrong, as I mentioned before. Obviously, being open to being wrong isn't an end-all be-all. He is someone who very much has that lawyerness in him where he's going to argue things that he knows aren't correct, which is pointless and just so against what is going to help the people that it leads me to speculate on him as a person. There's obviously the Israel situation that makes anyone who has heard him speak on it very curious on why he has that stance. And he was very apologetic and very much emotional at some points when he was having that debate with Dave Smith. So it's something I truly want everyone to go take the chance to watch. I did play a clip earlier in the video to try to highlight one of the things I thought was crucial and why I'm making my decision. But my final decision is I don't think that he is the man for the position. I don't think he's going to be the person who's going to be the end-all be-all. Of course, no one really is, but if I had to pick, I would say that Trump is going to be the person who I personally think is going to help the country within the next 4 years. He's going to be able to be the one who shows the most benefits and gains throughout these next 4 years. Do I think Robert F. Kennedy could be a future president in the future? Sure, maybe. But one thing I really notice is he's willing to pull the wool over his own eyes, not over the people's eyes. And maybe he's willing to pull it over the people's eyes, but he's definitely willing to pull it over his own eyes to create opportunities to find real truths. But also at the same time, sometimes it leads him off track of being able to provide enough for the people, and I don't think he is necessarily fit to be someone of that much power. I think he's going to be someone who inspires someone to take a stand, to be that person, but I don't think he is fit for the job. So this is unfortunate. I was hoping that I was going to be able to present more pros. I think this was good enough, though. So much love to anyone who watches this. We'll have one on Trump coming out this week. I want to actually make sure it comes out as good as I can do it, so I don't want to say a date yet, but much love.